All right, guys, welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have two separate guests from the state of Missouri, and they both wanted to share their Bigfoot encounters and experiences with us. I was very excited to speak with locals in the area who have had experiences with these creatures, and I'm always looking for more answers, especially from my home state. Missouri is an excellent place to look for Bigfoot, and it has a lot of wilderness. Even its own residents have no idea that these creatures exist. Experiencing this type of activity can definitely change your mind and the way you view the world. You will certainly question everything, and it opens up many different rabbit holes that never seem to end. If you live in the deep, remote wilderness areas of Missouri, it will definitely terrify you because there's no one out there to help you, and these things can come from any direction and terrorize you at any point in time. But also, if you experience this activity close to a city or a big town, it's kind of startling because it'll make you wonder where they came from and what are they doing so close to society. And I think that's one thing that really blows people's minds is whenever they have this type of activity close to populated areas. But yeah, with all that being said, guys, let's dive straight into our next set of Bigfoot encounters from the state of Missouri. All right, Dan, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you so much for asking. Dan, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm Dan Ibrahim. I grew up in the Republic, Springfield, Missouri area since I was about 5. Did the whole Boy Scouts and avid outdoorsman thing at a young age. Started caving, and OZARKS is full caves, so I started caving and getting into like rock climbing and the vertical stuff, and would even backpack, sometimes even solo as a teenager by myself. So I've really immersed myself in the woods and never really had anything outside of the normal science perspective happen to me. So when these, I was always interested though in the paranormal, like UFOs and such. And so I'd see these shows and kind of wonder, be like, no, I just don't really know if it's possible. And then the more and more I'm like kind of looking into it, I'm like, well, it seems like a lot of these people are credible and they're having encounters that they can't explain, and they're good witnesses, good testimony from people that are, seeing what they're seeing at close range. They're not misidentifying bear or anything. So I'm like, well, all right, I'll go see for myself, And I was out in Colorado and Oklahoma and in these areas where these things have been known to be, and I was seeing some sign, like in the formations of wood and impressions in the ground, and that led to me to believe there would be footprints of some sort. So then I kind of did some research as to local areas around here, as where I could go. And lo and behold, I was having so I wanted to find an area that was legal, that I could go into, not private property, obviously. So I was like, Mark Twain National Forest. That's the only thing that makes sense, being in Missouri. So I went to this area and I went on a whim, kind of by myself, and I got way down deep in there, and something was, off. I felt like I was not alone in the woods, and then all of a sudden these 3 deer were bolted by me. And I was like, holy cow. So I hunkered down instead of, I don't know, kind of moving out of the area, because I knew they were being ran by something, but something inside me was like, all right, hunker down here real quick. So I hunkered down, and then I got a really odd feeling. And my sixth sense stood up, or was telling me, look in this direction. And I looked in this direction, and through the woods, through the thicket, I'm seeing what looks like a black face. I can't really make any details out, but I'm like, that looks like a face. And I'm like, man, I looked right there, and there it was. So I'm like, holy cow, holy cow. So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to try to go towards this face. And by the time I get there, it's probably 100, 150 yards through the woods. It's gone. And there's this little bitty, what I call an asterisk, like the stick structure where it was at, like floating, like it was like an X but more things woven through the X, and like tiny, like out of inch-sized stuff. The base that was stuck in the ground was like maybe an inch and a half, and everything was kind of floating off of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, somehow it was able to build this little thing in the time I was able to get here. I'm like, what in the world, So I'm really starting to freak out now because I'm, thought I saw a face, and there's these deer being ran around, and there's these stick structures everywhere. And I'm like, I'm out here by myself. Nobody knows I'm out here. I'm like, what am I doing? So I'm like, okay, it's time to go back to the car. So I don't run, and I don't want to show too much fear. So I'm like, I'm going to go back to the car. So I start walking back to the car. I found the trail because it was off trail, and the trail down there was just used by the locals, some horseback riders. It's not even an established trail through this area. It's like the old part of the forest where it's kind of, there's no trails. But anyway, so I found my way back to this old trail, and I'm walking down it, and there's this perfectly picked mushroom, an edible one of some sort, like a chanterelle or something, laying on this log in the middle of the trail. And there was like, I had beaten spider webs off to get there, and then beaten spider webs off the other side after I crossed this log. So this thing came in from the side in the woods, knew that I was going to be on this trail, and like placed a little mushroom there for me in my way. So like, these things are definitely the masters of the woods, and intelligent and wanting to interact. So I was like, holy cow. So that was my first experience. And yeah, I was blown away.
Yeah, that is interesting. What did the face look like?
It was round. I think this was a juvenile. Like, I didn't get much conical features. It looked like the size of a basketball, maybe, but it was a more oval than round. So it was ovalish, but like I said, it was so, that wasn't that the seeing that wasn't really, like, I've gotten way closer times afterwards. So that was just the first one, and then I had a neighbor that was working with me, uh, helping me out on my tree service, and I told him about this, and he was like, okay. So I brought him in there, and the very first time I brought them in there, apparently they were probably mad that I was bringing somebody. They were all right with me, but as soon as I brought somebody else in, it was a quiet day in the afternoon. A wind, were dead still. So I knew they were like, you could feel this presence. Like, if they're there, and the woods are just relaxed. You can tell they're not there. You can tell they were there, and this tree got snapped. I mean, like it. So when as an arborist, I know about tree rot and stuff. And if a tree is rotten and it falls in the woods, you don't really hear the initial falling. You hear it hitting the ground and maybe hitting other trees as it's falling through the canopy before it hits the ground. But you don't hear an initial break because it's rotten wood and it's a weak point. It's something easy. The tree is easily falling down, right? Well, this thing sounded like a shotgun going off. It was green wood exploding, and then you could hear it ripping through the canopy and then hitting the ground. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was a very, that had to be at least the size of a telephone pole. So just the power of these things is crazy. So it snapped a tree on us, and then we were walking around through there, and we got some wood knocks and stuff, and we brought a camera down in there, and I had accidentally left it. So my third encounter, I was going down in there and to find my camera that I left, but I didn't have much daylight, and I didn't want to go to the other side of the canyon by myself without it, becoming dusk and me in there by myself. So I was like, I'm just going to search on this hillside nearest the car, and I didn't find it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the trail and just take a listen for a little bit. And I'm looking across the canyon, thinking I'm going to get sound, or if I do hear anything, it's going to be, from not right by me. Well, in between me and my car, on the same level I was the clearest wood knock I ever heard. It was so loud, it sounded like a metal baseball bat almost hitting a tree. I mean, just ding, ring. And it just immediately put the hairs up on me, man. And it was in between me and my car. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? These things are just out here toying with me. They clearly heard my car, so they know it's me. They're intelligent. One other time I was out there with a different buddy, and we were starting to do night stuff and leaving gifts, and they would, take gifts and leave I had done another time. They have a thing with mushrooms with me, so they'd done another mushroom on the trail, left it for me. I picked mushroom. But one time we were out there at night, me and my buddy, and we thought we saw a deer antler hanging in this vine above this thicket. So he was going in to go look at it, and something stood up, like was rustling in the leaves, stood up, and then took 4 steps, but we never saw it. So that's when this whole, the whole possible paranormal thing comes into it. I'm sure you've heard of.
And what did the creature look like that stood up? And
Well, we didn't see it.
okay,
And we don't know why we didn't see it, because it was only 10 feet in front of us. We heard 4 perfect steps, then it just stopped. It would sound like a person was rustling, stood up in the leaves, like we try something, stood up in the leaves, took 1, 2, 3, 4. Like we both had. He's an ex-military boy too, from Afghanistan, and he was an MP and did some also stuff to relieve the base and going out. So he was, used to being drawing his gun. He drew his gun. I drew my gun. It was right there. He was backing out, and you could hear it. And he was like, "What was that?" And I was like, "I don't know. Back up. I got you. Back up," because he was closer. But we never saw it, even though it was right there. So that kind of blew our minds. Oh, and that night they left. But that night they also left that. We went in and we left 4 bananas for him. And then when we walked back out, there was a mushroom on the trail in front of us. I came back there 3 days later, and we left those bananas about 2 miles from where we parked the vehicle on this ridge. So you just walk down the straight ridge trail and then just walk back down the trail you came in onto your car. Well, we left these bananas probably a mile and a half in there. When I returned 4 days later, they were only about 500 feet from the parking lot. All 4 bananas were still attached together. Everything. The bananas were gone. The peels were attached, and they were slit only up one crease of the bananas. Like they used their nail or whatever and just or just peeled it apart from just one of the creases, and all 4 bananas were completely clean and gone. But asked to say thank you and bring us more. They were only like a couple hundred feet from the car. So I don't know, man. Some crazy stuff. Stick structures. I've had them answer me with calls before. Once we were out there in a different area at night, and we were doing calls every once in a while. You know how you do. You can't resist sometimes, seems like. And this one mimicked me 3 times in a row. And it seems like they'll give you a little bit, but then that's it. Like the ones around here, they're so hard to get anything out of. But when they do, it's like, wow, that is clearly something out here messing with me.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. And the Mark Twain National Forest is an active area, and they are present in that spot. And it is
yeah,
strange because I've had similar experiences where something's following you and it just seems like it's invisible. You can hear footsteps and it's paralleling you. And when you look,
yeah,
nothing's there. You stop, it stops. And
yeah.
it's strange. And I do know what you mean by the paranormal.
Well, that time it was different. Now, we did have them that night parallel us out, you know what I mean? And they would exactly stop, and you can catch them if I would whisper my buddy and be like, stop quick. And we'd stop quick, and you'd hear them take that extra step. You could catch them. But this was different, man. This was, like I said, right in front of us, and we should have seen it. And I don't get why we didn't see it. Also, I just don't understand. So I've seen some UFOs, I've seen a couple, but I've seen one real close where it can't be denied of what it was, and I saw it with another person, sort of thing. So we just both collaborate. So, but what I don't understand with this Bigfoot phenomenon is how they have ape-like appearances to some that see them, and they have ape-like tendencies, and they're maybe not necessarily nesting like gorillas, but the nesting and the wood structures and the whoops and territorial thing, but yet also can be completely, and change their frequency and mind speak, and I mean, I just don't get, like, is there multiple beings out there, and some are like Chewbacca and can fly a spaceship, and others are like, a gorilla and can't even make fire? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's hard to say, really. I mean, I do feel like there is a connection between Bigfoot and the UFOs, but it's all pure speculation. And I just say that because of the people that are being abducted,
Right.
the experiments that are being done on humans, and the fact that there's these humanoid creatures out in the woods, and it's not just
Yeah.
Bigfoot. Like we're talking about,
Right.
like Dogman,
Dogman
Mothman,
and
I don't know,
yeah,
Lizard
yeah,
Man.
yeah.
There's all kinds of other things,
That
and
kind of stuff.
I don't feel like it's a natural phenomenon that they're natural creatures of this earth, like a lot
So,
of people
so you
say.
don't, okay. So you don't think that there's even that there might be some that are just straight up, say, non-manipulated bipedal hominid species that don't have any woo to them, that are just like can't even make fire. You think that possibly all of them are like of the Sabe type people, you know what I mean, and have those extra sensory perceptions and abilities?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. I've heard people mention that there's different types, and some are like
Right.
the primate
See,
kind, and some have like supernatural abilities, and some are connected to the giants. But I mean, I think they're
right.
all pretty much the same, and they can all do, the same type of stuff.
Stuff.
hmm
Yeah.
But that's all speculation of just
Yeah, yeah.
sitting around wondering about this phenomenon because, when it comes to like finding the bones or someone putting one
Right. There
down,
there are.
they all seem to be able to hide just as good. And I don't know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I also look at it though as the chimpanzee. We only have like three or four bones in the fossil record of chimpanzees, and we obviously know they're, you know what I mean? So, and like bears, how many thousands of bears are in Missouri? I haven't seen, and I've seen a bear in Missouri and seen prints, but I've never come across a bear skull in Missouri, So the
hmm
forest really decomposes so quickly. And, now, and maybe, and even though they might also bury their dead, you know what I mean? So if, which doesn't honestly take too much intelligence. I mean, elephants go to have graveyards, kind of, you know what I mean? They go back and to the same area and have remember their dead, So it wouldn't be too far fetched to say an ape, a very, very intelligent ape, might not bury its dead, you know, knowing that scavengers would get it, you know,
hmm
knowing that it doesn't want to be, so it buries itself in caves or under rocks.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
the high acidity of the soil and the forest, the rest, we don't really find them because it's not fossilized credentials. There's no mud and the lack of oxygen in it. It's how a fossil has to form to be encapsulated and all that junk.
Yeah.
So it's like the forest could easily take care of bones on its own without supernatural abilities. So it's hard telling, not knowing.
Yeah. The
But
best
I've
I could
seen but
say
I've
is,
seen both sides to it. You know
mhm,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Like I've found a little hobbit structure. You know what I mean?
hmm
Like, did you see that one picture I showed you? That's the most amazing thing I've ever found, dude. It
Yeah.
was I call it the baby shelter. My theory is it was in this tiny little clearing inside of a cedar thicket, and it was, I think, was basically they had a tiny one, and there was a real hard winter, and it was a real hard winter before that. We had that when all the pipes were busting, even in Texas and everything, that snap in like 21.
hmm
Well, I found this that summer after 22, and I think the adults made that for the baby while they were out hunting or something. So if they're able to be, fourth, fifth dimensional or whatever, why would they suffer and then make a tiny little shelter, you know what I mean, for their infant, in my theory, because even a dog couldn't fit in this thing. This thing had to be made for something tiny, you know. Or I guess it could be the tiny hobbit people too are around here. I don't know, that little bitty lean-to structure that I found. That's the craziest thing I've ever come across in the woods,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. And the best I can say at this point is anything's possible. They could be
Yeah.
living out there and be natural creatures, or there could be some type of intervention with the paranormal and UFOs.
Paranormal.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
There's got to be something to it with that.
hmm
It has to be. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
yeah, I lean more towards something strange going on and something bigger than all of us because they're keeping it a secret. If there were natural creatures out there, I think it wouldn't be such a secret.
As big. Yeah. Yeah. That's
hmm
probably also a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, do you have anything else that you'd like to share? Anything that you'd like to add?
Just be safe in the woods. If you're gonna go out by yourself, at least have others know where you're at, and good plan. And honestly, try not to go out by yourself in the woods, at least not overnight in the deep woods, because yeah, you really don't know we don't know what's out there. Even guys like me and you that know what's out there, we don't know what's out there. So just be safe in the woods. That's all I got, man. Just be safe in the woods.
Yeah, that's great advice. And
Don't want to be in another 411 case.
right, no, no doubt. And I do appreciate you for talking to me today on Father's Day and taking the time to do so. And it really means a lot.
No problem. It's good talking to you and meeting you, Miguel. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always nice talking to a fellow Missourian. And if you're back out there in the Mark Twain National Forest, be careful, man.
yeah, I will. I try not to go out alone too much, and yeah, and I know enough now that I'm not looking as much as I used to be. Be careful what you look for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dan. Well, I appreciate you for taking the time to talk to me today. And if you encounter anything else in the future, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, we'll do. You have a good day, sir.
Yeah, you too. Take care, my friend. All right, let's move on to our next Bigfoot report from Missouri. We have Bill, who lives in southern Missouri, and he ran into David from the killing fields, and he learned that what was lurking around his property could possibly be a Sasquatch. Let's hear what Bill has to say. All right, Bill, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Oh, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And you had some strange Bigfoot experiences from the state of Missouri. If you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and these Bigfoot experiences from the very beginning.
Okay, I basically have a ranch that's in the Mark Twain Forest between Donovan and Alton, Missouri. So, and I've been out here for some 14 years, and it's basically been pretty quiet out here. Um, One of the biggest blessings have been, well, I've got horses and that, but the biggest blessing I've had out here has been just the deer. I've had deer here, and pretty much kind of like my friend David, that know you had podcast before. I would have deer coming to feeders every day, and it was a joy just to watch them. And my deer came one step further, and I even had deer that would come right up to the front door, and eat right out of your hand. And I even had have even had deer named, and um, I've done videos of them, like basically a small herd just out there just waiting, to greet you. And So it's been really neat. And I live basically 2 miles away from any roadway, and I have a mailbox that's a mile away on a dirt road. So it's pretty isolated out here. No, there's no traffic, no neighbors. So it's pretty isolated in the Mark Twain Forest here. And um, So I've enjoyed being out here, and I'm an artist by trade, so I can work from home, do internet work, so don't have to go to work someplace. So I've been pretty much isolated out here, and most of the time been out here, been single. So, and an avid woodsman, hunter. So I've combed every square inch of the woods out here for miles in every direction. Love to explore and see what's out there, and pretty much, you know, uh, always curious about whatever animals or tracks and all that stuff. So pretty much, and I go way back on that. This it's like in the world record book for deer hunting years ago and stuff like that. So I've always been a real outdoorsman.
Okay, I appreciate you for sharing that with me. Can you tell me about the first experience that you had on your property when you began to learn that something strange and off was going on around you?
Sure. What it was I would have deer, uh, like these deer I'm telling you about. They would come like clockwork, morning, evening, and it's it's and then one uh one morning it's like no nothing showed up. So I'm thinking, oh, something must be going on. Well, in the evening too, nothing showed up. And I thought, well, that's really unusual. This is like the first time ever that I can remember that deer not showing up. And so I was wondering if something was out in the woods, maybe a mountain lion or something chasing them, upsetting the deer movement. And the other thing could have been maybe poachers out there, but I didn't hear any shots or anything, or no vehicles. Um, so it really got my curiosity. And the next day, nothing again. And I thought, okay, and something's got to be up. Uh, so I started processing. Well, if there's a mountain lion out there, or maybe two or three of them, then that could be the reason. So I ended up getting some traps, some mountain lion traps that I was going to put out. But in the meantime, um, I actually had I went out one time, and one of the does the uh, came running just straight off the hill and came running right towards me, and she was out of breath. So I got her a drink of water, and she basically, like a quart of water, she drank the whole thing down, and then just took off again. And I thought, right then and there, I thought, okay, something is chasing the deer, and I can't. Um, and uh, so I tried to figure out, okay, what am I going to do here? So being a hunter, I'm ready to deal with whatever is chasing the deer, because you know. Uh, so in the evening that day, I had like a young buck that did the same thing, came running off the hill, ran right up to me, and basically reached out to pet it on the head, and then it took off, and I never saw these deer again. So after that, I thought, okay, this is getting serious. Whatever's out there. So I basically went out, and I got armed up, to go hunting. And interesting enough, I didn't see any deer out there at all. I would before then I could go out to the woods, and I'd basically call, and I'd have deer coming over to me, and no deer anywhere. And I also started noticing that there was no squirrels, no birds singing. So it was kind of like an eerie kind of a feeling. It's like, what's going on here? And I would go to the north of the property, and I went up the hill there, and I smelled something really foul, like something just really foul smelling. And I was trying to pinpoint it. So it seems like it was right here, and this was like the place that is smelled the worst. But I couldn't smell anywhere else around there. And I was trying to figure that out. I thought, it smells like something maybe was dead here, but now is not, not. It's been removed. So I couldn't figure that out at all. And there was no drag marks, no nothing going on. It's just like something's been there at some point, but now there isn't. Okay. So I kind of logged that down in my mind. And then I went south, and this is like over a period of a couple of days, just scouting around trying to figure out what's going on. And I went down south where there's a stream that's running, and I figured, and now this was like in July, so it was pretty hot, and I figured too, whatever might be out there, whatever predator, it would probably be down by where there was a cool stream with running water. And so I kind of spent more time down there. And I was walking along the stream there, and I saw a patch of hair right beside the water. And I went to examine that hair, and it looked like something that had a big hand that grabbed a deer like by the stomach, and there was white hair and brown hair that were in that batch. So like a big batch of hair that was just chunk just ripped off and laying there on the ground. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, that looks like maybe something grabbed it and tried to pick it up and lost the grip, and so just all these hair that are in a bunch. And so I'm still trying to put together like what in the world could have done that. Like a mountain lion wouldn't leave like a whole patch of hair like that. So anyway, and I looked around for tracks. Really didn't see any tracks. I mean, but the problem here too is that the ground here, unless it's been raining, the ground here is mostly clay and rock. And a track, you could have an elephant walk out here and not leave much of a track. So the ground is pretty hard to track anything. And um, and so I looked where there would be even like by the creek, you don't see really much anything for mud. And so I didn't find any tracks, even though I looked. And so it just became more of a puzzle, like what in the world is going on here, and where the deer, what's after the deer, and I just couldn't figure it out. And so this weekend came up, and I ended up doing an art show. Um, and at this art show, this whole thing been on my mind, and there was a fellow that came there, and I kind of brought that up to him. I says, it's really weird. It's like the deer in my place have disappeared, and I've been trying to figure this out. And what I didn't know is there was another fellow that was eavesdropping onto the conversation, and he was just kind of waiting for this guy to leave so he could talk to me. And it turns out that when the fellow left, this guy walks up, and his name, um, uh, um, well, first of all, he didn't tell me his name, but anyway, he said, I bet you, I know what happened to your place." And so he started talking, and he says, "Sasquatch, a family of Sasquatch." And I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?" And well, it turns out to be David. And then, anybody that's seen your podcast knows who David is. And so David was telling me about all his experience with the family Sasquatch that was his place. and which really gave me a good education, because all the stuff he was saying all of a sudden made sense now, as the what I was trying to figure out. And as it turns out too, we figured out um, that the travel pattern where this family would have left would have came straight down, because he's basically at the end of the Mark Twain forest, and I'm at the northern end, and I'm at the southern end of the Mark Twain forest, and there's over 1,000,000 acres of forest in between us. So and there's only one roadway in between that, and that's Highway 60. So they would have just had to cross one road between his place and my place, and no farms in between, no nothing. So they would have had anyway. So as it turns out, so when I came back here, I I knew then what I was after. And the question is like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go hunt these things? Am I going to, try to get pictures of them, or what? Um, and that's where things got interesting, because I decided to to go out, and I was going to get one of these things, as proof. So which after talking to David too, he said, that's a mistake. Don't try to do that, because if you go after them, they will come after you, and you don't want to do that. But I'm thinking, okay, these things have killed all my deer, you know, and these things are so they're not like harmless, and I didn't appreciate them, killing everything. And now they didn't bother horses or anything like that. Um, so it wasn't that they were, attacking anything except the deer. And so and with David, the deer that they killed in his place, they just left stacked up, and that, and but with me it was a little more personal, because I had my deer named, and it was more of a personal loss. So I did end up going after him, and I kind of went down to where they would have been in the heat of summer, which was down by the creek, and where I ended up finding these hair. And I went there, and I was ready to do battle. So, and I even did the different kind of things, like knock on a tree with a you know um, with a log, whistle, and all that. And what I mean, it was pretty gutsy, because it was like 10 yards away where you had the thickest woods. One of them could have been on top of me within a split second, being that close. And yet, in that, hey, you know, you're on my turf, and, the kind of thing. So, but needless to say, I never had a response, which is probably a good thing. But, and I also thought, okay, if I was going to do battle with these, how could you bring back, a 400-pound creature? How could you drag that back from you know, from a creek, for like a quarter mile? It's like, forget that. And then if there's a family of them, um, they would dispose of the body before you could ever get back. So still, you would end up with nothing. So the next time I went out, I took a hatchet with me, an axe, double-bladed axe. So my plan was, if I did kill one, I would, chop off a head or something, and then bring that back with me. And then in the process of that, somebody told me I wouldn't be doing that, because you bring back a head to your house, and they will attack your house. You'll have trees coming through your roof, and and all that. So then then I figured, okay, all right, forget bringing back a head. or any part of that, because you're just asking for a battle. And so ultimately, though, I like and talking to David, he was saying that he and his brother ended up just going around doing some shooting around there to kind of let them know they're not, welcome around there, and to move on. And apparently that did the trick. So, hunters shooting and all that as kind of a message to move on to someplace else. So that's what I ended up doing here. So I ended up going out in the mornings and evening and just shooting around, um, and still no deer though. Deer gone, and I was just hoping these things would leave and go somewhere else. And as it turns out, a few days later, well, it was about 4 days later after I started doing the shooting, I run into a neighbor out here that lives like 3 miles away. And he says, it was the weirdest thing. This morning I was going down the road and I looked up ahead of me on J Highway. He said, up there about eighth of a mile ahead of me, there was a big old tall uh, black bear walking across the road. He must have been 9 feet tall. And he says he was walking across the road on his back legs and swinging his front legs. Says I never knew that a black bear could get that tall. And I'm thinking, I didn't say anything to him, but I'm thinking that was no bear. Bear don't walk across the road like that. That probably was a Sasquatch, and it was heading west to the 11 Point River. Um, so which the 11 Point River is like about 5 miles from here, 4 or 5 miles. So it made sense that they would be going that way to the next waterway, and then going who knows where from there. So anyway, um, so that kind of concluded, them being here, and you know me trying to figure out and trying to deal with them here. So um, you got a next question?
No, that's very interesting. You found a big clump of hairs. I've found that before too, and I don't know. I've wondered, like, what the heck would have done that? Seems like something tried to attack a deer, and I just don't see a deer losing that big of a patch of fur just by,
Right.
like, I don't know, them sparring or I don't know, whatever it may be.
Right. And then the thing I put together is that it probably was carrying the deer and went the bend down to get a drink and put the deer down, and then had to pick the deer back up to put it on its shoulders. So that's kind of the image I put together. Now what I did sometime after that is I one morning I come out of the shower and I looked out the window without my glasses on, and I saw three big shapes out there, uh, where I have a salt lick. It's about 20 yards from the house, and the salt lick is for the horses. But I saw three big black shapes out there, and I thought, what in the world is that out there? So I went and got my glasses, put that on. It turned out to be three big wild hogs, and so I ended up go getting a rifle, and I shot the biggest hog, and it went about 10 yards. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take this hog and I'm going to make a test case out of this hog. So what I did is I drug it out the gate. I got a side by side and hooked it up and drug it out the gate in this clearing out in the national forest. And basically, it's where a roadway comes in here, and there's a clearing on the side. It's just a little clearing, not about maybe like a 5 yard by 5 yard clearing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put this hog there and clear all the ground around it and just see what comes in to feast on this. And about every other day, I would go out, check my mail or something, and I'd look over there, and nothing touched this hog. And it really surprised me because you could see this hog from the air, and there's always buzzards out here, that get whatever you have. And I was really surprised that none of the buzzards had touched this thing, because I figured they would. Anyway, a week later, I go driving out there. The whole hog is gone, and I'm thinking, what? And so I thought, okay, I need to look for some, prints or drag marks. I didn't find anything. The ground was just like I left it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how did this thing just up and leave without being drugged, or there's no blood, no nothing. It's like it's just gone. And the only explanation I could come up with is that here it is, just like the deer. A week later, they leave something laying that they killed, even though I killed it in this case. But they won't eat it until a week later, till after the meat marinades, I guess. So, but the whole hog's gone. And then I looked in the surrounding woods around there to try to find some parts, anything, nothing anywhere around there. So any wild animal that would have got it, even though it didn't leave tracks, there would be some remains around there somewhere, and nothing. It's just like that too convinced me, it had to be something that could pick up a 200-pound hog and just put it on his shoulder and take it somewhere. So, but so after that, it was like, all right, uh, I don't want to. Um, it's not like I didn't want to mess with these things, but um, but I ended up understanding too that if you have a pistol on you, don't even engage. Don't shoot at a Sasquatch, an 8-foot Sasquatch with a pistol. All you're gonna do is just, I mean, you know, it, it's the only way you should ever engage anything that big is if you've got some firepower. And even then, you better be ready, for backup because they're hardly ever alone. They usually travel, in a family group, and any kind of shooting or any kind of screams that they make are gonna attract, the rest, and then you're really in for it. So, um, which that's just what I have tried to figure with that, and so since then, though, I've gotten, educated. It's that you either, I don't know, you either leave them alone and let them do their thing, or you, if you do have to engage these creatures, and that goes as well for Dogman, is you better be ready to go to battle with these things. You better be equipped and ready, almost like going into combat, or else don't even bother, you know. Because I have heard stories where military have run into, you know, um, these creatures, and have actually, killed them, with military hardware, but that's pretty much what it would take. And most people do not have that kind of, hardware. So I don't know. It's all right. Next question.
Yeah, I've heard a similar account from a guy that I interviewed in Van Buren, Missouri, and that's what he said. He put out some like 300-pound hogs that he had shot, and a few days later they were just gone completely.
Right. Yep. And for some reason they like hogs. Well, deer and hogs are, the two biggest things. Although up there in Van Buren, there's also elk up there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's elk on
um,
David's property as well. And
yeah.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder what's really on the property because you never actually seen these things. So was it actually Sasquatch or was it something else? You did mention Dogman, so it's really hard to determine what could really be going on.
Right. Well, I tell you what, the reason I mentioned Dogman is because that is actually an encounter I did have uh, years ago in Nebraska, and that's an encounter where I actually did come face to face with a Dogman, and um, and it wasn't till years later when there was more encounters of Dogmen where people actually had pictures that were described of a Dogman. And from what I remember, those things are very accurate. The red eyes, the snout, kind of like a wolf snout, the kind of like the wolf ears, the elongated arms, claws. Um, the silver, and the one I saw had like silver fur, and I mean that thing stood like 8 feet tall, and the eyes were red. I mean, it's one of those images you can never forget. And and what ended up happening with this thing here is that it was shortly after I got out of the hospital, and I was in the hospital, and I was laid up for about a week, and in the process, this was like outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, and living out in the country, and I was building a house out there. And because I've been in the hospital and basically just trying to rest up, trying to heal up, and I remember that I had this big dog, that an outside dog, and it was a full moon that night, and I was inside sleeping. Next thing I know, I hear this dog just going off, barking like crazy, and and usually if there's a deer or something, the dog would bark, but not this much. And so I would tell the dog, "Be quiet," like I'm trying to sleep. It wouldn't be quiet though. It just kept barking. So finally, I got up. Put on some shoes and little clothes, and I went out there. And he was barking down towards the horse corral. So I had two horses down there, and it was about 100 yards away from the house. And he just kept barking and barking, and I looked down there, and the horses were all freaked out uh, at one end of the corral and looking back at the other side. And so it seemed like there was something down there. And at that point, I just woke out of a deep sleep, and I didn't even think about grabbing a gun or anything. I just went down there to see. So I walked down there, walked down where the horses are at, and then they're just looking over there, and then they're just all skittery. So I walked over, and one thing I noticed too, my dog didn't bother coming with me. So I'm by myself. The dog stayed up on the porch, and I walked over diagonally to the corral, and there's a patch of woods right there, and right where the woods started, it's the moonlight. Basically, you couldn't see back in the woods because it's too dark, real dense. But right at the edge there, when I walked around there about 10 yards away, I looked, and there's this thing standing there looking at me. And you could, I mean, the thanks to the full moon, you could see this thing as bright as day. And it was looking at me, and I stopped and looked at this thing, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? It's we're going to stare each other down or what? So something inside me, which most people would never in a million years do. Yeah, of course, that's I've never been considered normal, but I charged it like I'm gonna tackle this thing, and so I ran after it, and like, and I was serious. I was gonna grab this thing and beat the crap out of it or something or other, you know. It's like, you know, you don't come and freak everybody out, you know, horses and everything. So anyway, I ran after it, and as I'm running towards it, it turns around and it just disappears. And I'm just like, what? So I stop because there's it's in the fall and there's leaves all in the ground. And you could hear a mouse run away if you stop and listen. But I didn't hear a sound. That's what really freaked me out. Where did this thing go? There's no sound. And I walked up to where it was and you know looked as much as I could and listened. No sound whatsoever. No nothing. It was just gone. And that convinced me that you know whatever these things are, they've got to be some kind of dimensional thing where they can just you know, they can appear and disappear. And later on, actually, just years later, and kind of reading other accounts from people, that's kind of the same thing they figured out is that these things, you know, uh, and there's more, you know, a lot more stuff, of course, that these things are dangerous as can be with their claws and their strength and everything. So, so I don't know, you know, and the way I see it is that you know this thing could have ripped me to shreds, but possibly because I went after it, it probably surprised us. Like, you know, who is this crazy guy? You know, or whatever. Who knows? Who knows? It's. But the way I see it, um, you know, I'm of the opinion that I don't have to be afraid of anything out there. So whenever I've gone deer hunting, I don't bring a flashlight. You know, I navigate through the dark woods, uh, you know, without a flashlight. And whatever's out there, you know, it needs to be afraid of me. I'm not going to be afraid of it, especially if I have a bow or a gun or whatever. So, and usually when I bow hunt, I don't have a pistol on me. You know, I depend on my bow. Of course, I've been bow hunting for decades. But it's that just that kind of thing though. It's just like, you know, you're either fearful of dark and what's out there, or you're not. And I think if you're not fearful, whatever it is out there knows that. You know, they sense that whether you're fearful or not. And you know, that goes for you know, wolves. It goes because I've seen wolves here. That goes for you know, just about anything out there. From what I understand, it doesn't work on grizzly bear though. Grizzly bear, don't try to intimidate or play macho with a grizzly. You know, you'll lose every time. So, but I've been out there with photography work, with you know bison, with bear. Um, I've been like within like 5 feet of bear in the wild, taking pictures, and you know elk, you name it. It's just like deer, of course, and you know a lot of things. So one thing I'm known for is you know like wildlife photography work. So I've been around the country, you know, mountain climbing and doing all kinds of things in the past. So anyway, so the Sasquatch and the Dogman have definitely been a real treat because you know there's not very many people that ever run across any experiences with them. So
Yeah,
so
absolutely. So the dogman creature that you encountered, did it just vanish into thin air, or do you mean it took off really fast?
I think the only thing I could put together that it literally left the physical world because it couldn't have run. I mean, I was only when I stopped, I was only 5 yards from where it started out, and the woods that was behind it. I mean, there was about oh, she's there was several hundred yards of woods with dry leaves, and I would have heard something. I heard nothing though. So the only explanation I have is that it must have vanished, into some other dimension or whatever. But then again, I've learned just recently that there actually are other dimensions, which is another interesting thing is that we really are just used to being in one dimension, but there are multiple dimensions that that exist. So that's another whole you know um, can of worms, I guess.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. What do you think these creatures are if they're just able to vanish into thin air?
I personally, well, I used to be a Christian, and so and the Christianity teaches that aliens and anything like that are like demonic. Okay, but since then I've kind of graduated, I would like to say, and a little bit beyond that, and the realizing that there could be a lot more than just simple explanations or simple categorize, that these things actually could be, um, well, for one thing, they could be an experiment of the government. Just like in Nazi Germany, the Nazis experimented around with apes and things like that, trying to make a super race, and then there's all kind of weird things that they tried to do back when, and who knows, our own government could be experimenting around with that kind of stuff too, and DNA manipulation, and who knows what. I mean, it's the cloning. There's all kind of stuff that you know is really questionable. So, because one story I heard was of a trucker who ended up, I think it was like up in Idaho or someplace. He was driving along at nighttime, and something jumped out in front of trying to cross the road. He's just slammed into it, and he figured that it was a bear or something, and so he just kept going. And then several miles down the road, he got to thinking about it, and he thought, I hope that wasn't a human that I ran over, because I would be in trouble. So he decided that he was going to turn around whenever he could, which took a while because it was just mountain road. And so when he finally got a chance to turn around, he did, and he came back to that spot. And when he came back to that spot, he said there were several black vehicles that were there at that same spot, and they had already gotten this thing, whatever it is, loaded up, and they were getting ready to head out. So, what does that tell you? So whatever this thing was, obviously it had a tracking collar on it or whatever, and somebody, whether it's the military or whoever, um, found out that this thing was now dead, and they needed to go get it before somebody else could find it. It's things like that where you really don't know. It's kind of like these drones right now. Who do these drones belong to? They're all over the country. It's like a big mystery. Um, and nobody wants to talk about it, especially our government. So what's up with that? It's just it's just what do you make out of it? So you know maybe we need to start doing drone podcasts or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And what time of year was it whenever you noticed the deer went missing?
This was July. So because I remember it was hot, and the deer that came the first time, it hadn't had a drink of water and probably days. And usually deer are pretty good. They can exist pretty well without water. They can go for like a week without a drink of water. And in this case, I mean, this deer has its tongue hanging out its mouth, and it drank like the whole quart of water that I gave it, and then took off. So it's with the heat and everything else, it would make sense. And what's amazing though, it's how these creatures can catch a deer that can run 40 miles an hour. You know, and I don't know whether they form they form a group where they try to triangulate a deer or something, where they're scared to run into where the other ones are waiting, or because it doesn't seem like they would be able to run down a deer and grab it, or sneak up on a deer. Because it's next to impossible to sneak up on a deer in the woods, especially if you stink. So so how is it possible that they're able to kill, the like wildlife deer that are considered the greatest survival animals on the planet? It's you know, so it's kind of interesting, unless who knows if these things can disappear and reappear. So if they can vanish into another dimension and then reappear right beside the deer and grab it, I mean that would be pretty wild.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Did you ever find any deer remains or anything that led you to believe that there was a predator there?
yeah, well, I just didn't know what kind of predator, but I never found any deer remains, so no bones, except for that patch of hair, and never found. I did find the collar of one deer. So what I did is I like the bright orange um, plastic tape that they have. Um, I put that around the deer's neck, so hunters wouldn't shoot it. Although I found out hunters don't care if it has a collar on it or not, they'll shoot it anyway. But it's so I found that like just laying on the ground. It's been broken off. But then that could have been, the deer. The reason I put one of those on the deer is because if it does get snagged, it'll break off instead of choke the deer. So, because I think putting a dog collar on a deer is stupid. Because if they jump, um, they run through the woods or whatever, and all that, or jump over a barbed wire fence, they could get caught on that collar, and then it would choke them to death because the collar wouldn't break off. So I would put just kind of tape, orange tape, that would break off. So because we've had deer out here, like one night, I heard like this screaming going on after it got dark, and I was wondering what in the world is that. So I took a flashlight and then I went up the hill, and there was a deer had its back leg caught in the fence, and it was caught basically upside down, and I was trying to help get the leg out, and I actually had to come back to the house and get some wire cutters and cut the fence where it could get loose, and it was bleeding and everything else. But things like that. It's fences, deer and fences and all that. Don't get along too well. But since the Sasquatch family was here, what I've done is the fencing that I did have around the property, I increased that fencing like from a regular 4 foot fence up to like a 7 foot fence. So since then I haven't had any wild hogs or coyotes or anything like that, on the property. Um, which has really helped, as far as keeping wildlife out of here. So, and I've also got um, cameras up now in different locations where I can see what's going on out there, and they're basically cameras that report back to your cell phone, and see what's out there. So, um, so it all kind of makes you just have to be more prepared. And who knows, maybe sometime get a picture of a Sasquatch on one of those. But from what I understand, because if you put regular trail cams out there, they don't work. Because a trail cam that has an SD card, okay, and I think it was David that ended up putting some trail cams out, but they smashed the trail cams. So then you can't get your pictures off of there because it's all smashed up, and more or less unless the SD card is still good, you really don't have anything. So in this case, the cameras I have, they even if somebody wanted to destroy the camera, they will take a picture of you before you destroy it. So you would have that, and they don't use SD cards. They just, their satellite image. So anyway, so I've gotten that going now, and different to the south, to the west, and to the east. I got those out there, and pretty much see what anything and everything that that's out there anymore, which is nice. But all I get though is pretty much deer for 90% deer and squirrels and just kind of wildlife.
Yeah. Well, it's good to keep an eye out on the property. And it sounds like you live in a good place to experience cryptid activity since you're in the Mark Twain Forest in southern Missouri. And I mean, I believe that's possibly what it could be. And I think you'll find out in the future what's truly going on there. So you'll just have to keep your head on a swivel and make sure you keep an eye out on kind of what's going on around the property.
Right. Yep. Well, and it's a daily kind of a thing, And I think too that the good part about it, or the good part about having any kind of contact with the unexplained out there is it teaches you to be more vigilant. Pay attention, which is always a good thing. I don't care if you live in the city or wherever, you should be vigilant because this is not a world that you want to have your eyes closed and not realize what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So
Well, I think that pretty well covers your experiences, and I really appreciate you for taking the time to talk about all this with me. And yeah, I'm glad you ran into David. He's got a lot of information to share, and he's a local, and I'm glad you guys could put the pieces of the puzzle together and kind of figure out what's going on.
right, yep, yeah, he's a good guy, and I really appreciate you, taking the time and hearing me out. And yeah, more pieces of the puzzle to put together, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you encounter anything else in the future, feel free to reach back out to me, and I would love to hear about it.
Okay, I sure will, Miguel.
All right, Bill. You have yourself an excellent Sunday, and you take care, my friend.
Okay, you too, brother. Okay.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Dan and Bill, thank you very much for sharing your Bigfoot encounters from the Show Me State of Missouri. And it was very exciting hearing about these encounters and experiences. The Mark Twain National Forest has had a lot of Bigfoot reports in the past, and that doesn't mean if you go to the Mark Twain National Forest, you're going to see a Bigfoot. That just means they are known to be in the area, and there's a lot of woods there, but there's also a lot of woods around the Mark Twain National Forest, and I feel like a lot of people get that confused, that if you want to see Bigfoot, definitely go to a national forest, which, don't get me wrong, it's an excellent place to look around because it's public land and there's a lot of logging roads and a lot of potential there, but at the same time, Private land is also an excellent place to experience this activity because there's not a lot of people venturing there, and some people own a ton of land that never even go to their property. So it makes you wonder where these creatures are at during the day and where they go to during the nighttime. But also there's many factors such as like portals, dimensions, intervention with like aliens and UFOs, and it's just something we have to consider just because they haven't found Sasquatch bodies out in the woods. The tracks just disappear. These things are known to just disappear and vanish into thin air. People see orbs associated with the activity. People feel marked or tagged like these things are following them around, and there definitely seems to be a supernatural side to it, but also there is a physical side to it. So I do believe it's some type of unknown primate species or some type of unknown hominid, ancient human, but along with that, I do believe it is an entity. So take it with a grain of salt. And yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening and tuning in today. What are your thoughts and theories regarding the Sasquatch? And if you guys can, like this podcast, follow the channel, and until the next one, be safe out in the forest.